Dr. Schultz, in your book, which is titled Trumpism, American Politics in the Age of Politainment, which you shared with me, and thank you so much for that, and I read it cover to cover, you talk about the hypermasculine nature of Trumpism. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of sources to what we would call Trumpism, but part of it is about the fact that if you look at a lot of his core base, a lot of his core base are white working class, especially males, and in general, it's a much more masculine base than a female base than it is in terms of who's voting for him. And part of what I argue is that his politics reflects, I think, this almost blow to masculinity that many of his supporters have really faced. I kind of tragically in the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years or so, maybe 40 years, in the sense that they used to be the primary breadwinners. They had union scale jobs that paid really good wages. Those jobs have disappeared. They're no longer in a society where we have really clearly defined roles of which they were comfortable in. And what Trump speaks to is the frustration, the anger that many of these individuals face. And without sort of doing pop psychology here a little bit,
Yeah.
there is a sense in which his bravado, his way of approaching politics, really speaks to what a lot of these individuals would like to say, but maybe feel like they can't really say anymore because circumstances have changed in their society or their life.
Oh, that's
He is
fascinating.
he is their spokesperson. He says what they want to say.
So many of these men are no longer the king of their castles, then not the sole monarchs anymore. Many of them, their spouses are also
Right.
bringing in income, sometimes even higher than them, more income than them. And this may be a frustration in the last 20, 30 years.
It is. It is for people who were raised from a different generation where they were still raised with the idea of the very traditional sex roles in our society that the male is the breadwinner. He's supposed to
Yeah.
be kind of the protector of the family. Uh, and and the reason why I think this is important, I know for many people they'll say, well, they're not sympathetic to these individuals. I have some sympathy for them because the plight that they're facing speaks something about the changing fortunes of America. And again, I think of my father who passed away many years ago, who was working class, never went to college, actually never even went to high school, but managed to get a good job, work a good job in a union, and was able to provide for the family. Those jobs at the auto plants, at the steel mills, manufacturing. This was the core of America. This was
Yeah.
this, and we've lost all that. And and for many of these men who they have become what I hate to use the phrase the losers in the new economy, but they've become the losers in the new economy, and we've done very little to address their economic fortunes and needs.
Which
And
is real.
which is real. It's absolutely real. And one of the other ways that it manifests itself out is the fact that the opioid crisis in America
Oh
uh,
boy. Yeah.
falls disproportionately hard in the areas that vote for Donald Trump. I mean, we could do almost a perfect map. If I were to get a map of all the counties in the United States and color them in there in terms of which counties voted for Trump versus didn't, and then fill those same counties in with a map in terms of the highest incidences of opioid overdose in America, the correlations are stark in terms of the overlap.
Oh boy. So as you talk about this, this hyper masculine nature of Trumpism, even if we take the word Trumpism, this issue has got to reverberate through Congress because many of the members of Congress represent these people.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely correct. And one of the few things we're seeing a little of bipartisan agreement on, but still not a lot, for
Mhm.
example, is on the issue of let's say opioid problems and opioid addiction. Although we're still not putting the resources we need into that. We're still not putting the resources into, let us say, mental health. But what we're not really addressing is that underlying economic inequality. That I did a piece recently about 3 or 4 months ago, and every year Forbes magazine lists like the richest people in the world. I totaled up the 10 richest individuals in America. The 10 richest men, they're worth $1 trillion. That's their net worth.
Wow.
The bottom 45% of America does not have a net worth of $1 trillion.
Bottom 45%?
The bottom 45% does not.
Holy moly.
And someone said to me, is there any relationship with there being so many few rich people and so many poor people? And I said, yeah, there is a relationship between the two.
Yeah.
And we unfortunately have one of the worst gaps between the rich and poor ever in American history. Unfortunately, our social mobility has largely ground to a halt. And what I'm getting at here is that we need to address the underlying economic problems that I think are driving part of Trumpism also, which is it is the fact that we've got these huge inequalities that are threatening, I think, the family structure, the mental health, our political system. And that's where we have almost no agreement in Congress on what to do.
Did we see any display of this hypermasculinity in Congress this year? In a way, much of it was the lack of negotiations, playing chicken. Would you put those in that category?
I would. I would also put the fact that the again the confrontational politics close to a shutdown again. I would say the confrontational politics over selecting a Speaker of the House. I would even say to some extent, as we are taping this show in early December, um, Speaker Johnson has said we're just about getting ready to proceed with perhaps impeachment hearings or impeachment investigations for Biden. It is all about confrontational, in your face politics now, and I think a lot of that really is driven by the hypermasculinity that we find in American politics now. And if I can sort of bring it to a personal kind of a note here too, in a way,
All right.
is that I do a lot of interviews, media, local community talks, and so forth. And a generation ago, if people wanted to contact me and they disagreed with me or something, it was a very respectful, dear Professor so and so, I heard you. I don't agree, and it would be a very nice, respectful kind of exchange. Um, Now, when I do hear from people, it's it's incredibly insulting. It's threatening. The way I describe it, it starts off with someone almost thinking that my mother should have been prosecuted for giving birth to me,
Oh,
and it goes down from there. But I've actually had to um, call the police twice because my phone at work um, records the number, and I had people threatening me, and I had to call police. And so it's not just Congress; it's a much more confrontational, I think, society than we've had before. And I just see it in terms of how people contact me and how they approach me, even though I don't know who these people are.
as you were sharing your personal story, I chuckled a couple of times because it's funny, but in a
Yeah.
way, it's massively tragic that this would
Yes.
happen to anyone for just something you said.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm commenting on something or I'm trying to describe something,
Yeah.
and remember the old phrase, don't shoot the messenger? Well, in some sense, messengers are being, if I can say that, are being shot at this
Yeah.
point. And and everybody disagrees with you, and it's okay to disagree. And I've made mistakes too, and I'm more than happy to acknowledge them. But just again, just the push, the way it's happened. And I've really seen this start since about 2010. So it's about 13, 14 years where we started to see this real shift in terms of our culture. And maybe that's sort of the time where we start to see the
Yeah.
hypermasculinity of Trumpism, its roots start to emerge.
In your book, Trumpism, American Politics in the Age of Politainment, you have 10 rules. Rule number 3, I'll just read it for you. It says, Taylor Swift is right. And you talk about anger. I was so intrigued by that I asked my daughter to go find me any Taylor Swift song that has
Yeah.
politics in it. And she did. So I'll just share a couple of
Okay.
lines from Miss Swift's song, Antihero. It goes as such. Did you hear my covert narcissism I disguise as altruism like some kind of congressman? So
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
that line. It's about narcissism. I don't know how you correlate Taylor Swift with anger, and then that goes to politics. Explain
Okay.
that,
So,
please.
okay. So here, let me tell you a little bit about the book also. So,
Yeah, please.
when I wrote the book, I had a lot of because I wanted to sort of distill American politics down to about 10 rules, and do it in kind of a way that references pop culture to make it accessible to the general public. Well, we have to confess, I'm a baby boomer, and my pop culture references would be dated for many people. And I gave a talk to a local high school several years ago, and as oftentimes I do, I end my talk to the high school students by saying, and if anybody wants to do a follow-up, contact me. And no one ever does. But this time, a delightful young woman named Avery called me, and she said, I heard your talk and it was really interested. I'm going to go to college at some point. I don't know, and I'm thinking of majoring in political science, but I'm not sure. Can I shadow you? Basically, sort of like, see what you do as a political scientist. And I said, sure. And I told her about the book and she read it and she said, or a draft of it. She said, great. But she said, it's nobody of my generation can relate to any of your examples. And I said, so give me some examples here. And my original reference there was to Rod Stewart, a great rock and
I
roller.
love Rod Stewart. Yeah.
And he had a wonderful song called Passion. That's
Oh,
all
yeah.
about passion. Great
Yeah.
song. And she said to me, who's Rod Stewart? And I said, okay, so now I know I got a problem. So I said, who writes about passion or anger or in politics? And she goes, Taylor Swift, of course. She says all her songs are all about, in some sense, anger and passion and how she's turning it to politics. And she pointed out and said, and now Taylor Swift is out trying to get her supporters to vote. So I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
what a perfect uh, um, uh, addition to the book. So Avery becomes my co-author, which I'm so delighted for. But she brought in such wonderful pop culture references that I would just never have thought of.
Oh, that's a great story. And so you think that anger rather than, well, you mentioned confrontational politics. So your position is that anger rather than optimism is what is driving our political discourse these days.
I think it is. Yeah. I mean, if we think of 2008, it was all about Barack Obama running on hope
Yeah.
and change. And that's the optimism. Or take us back a generation before that. It's Bill Clinton, which I reference in my book, that has a brilliant move when he gets the nomination. He's a baby boom candidate, and he plays at the Democratic National Convention, Fleetwood Mac's "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow,"
Oh, that's a good one.
about
Yeah.
hope in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
future. And a decade before, Ronald Reagan in 1984, one of the great political commercials of all time. It was "It's Morning in America." Uh,
Isn't that a
it's
great, visually is
abs,
great.
I mean, these are gorgeous themes.
Yeah.
But now it's really about it really became anger at this point. And even though Trump in 16 said, "Make America great again," the the it's there's a bit of optimism, but it's also a retrospective. It's saying, let's go back to the days that used to be so that we can be great again. And in it, there is this distillation of anger, of something lost, of expectations that have been thwarted that we used to have. And I see now that our candidates run upon anger, getting their base angry, getting their base motivated to hate the other side. That's the change. That's the
Yeah.
change in American politics.
Yeah, and it's a big one. We'll be back after a short break to talk about politics, populism, and entertainment. We'll be right back.